Morning Pathway. How's everybody doing this morning? Whoa. It's early on a weekend morning. All right. Well, welcome to Pathway. If you're a guest with us this morning, we are so glad that you're here. Now, it's probably one of those things, hey, I'm going to try out this church. I hear great things about the pastor. And then you show up, and the pastor's not preaching. Well, he's back on platform next week. So what a great excuse to come 2 weeks in a row. All right. Well, I'm glad to be filling in for him this morning. He was at a conference all week, and you've been listening to people talk probably nonstop for like 3 or 4 days, and now you get to hear me talk nonstop for like 3 or 4 hours. If you're a guest with us today, we do not talk for 3 or 4 hours. All right, so we're gonna be okay. Well, today we're continuing our Red Letter series. And in our Red Letter series, we're looking at the red letters. Now, some of you might know in many Bibles, they have black letters and they have red letters. And the red letters are the words that were spoken by Jesus. It points that out. Say, hey, the Savior of the world spoke these letters, right? Or spoke these words. So it's probably something that's very important to look at. So this is our third week in the 4-week series where we're looking at some of the statements of Jesus. Now, there are a lot of statements made by Jesus throughout the New Testament. Well, we chose 4 passages that are sometimes maybe a little bit difficult to listen to, that may go against the grain a little bit, that go opposite of how we think that might be done, right? So we're going to take one of those passages today. We're actually going to look at it's almost like a graduation speech that Jesus has given as his disciples are transforming from being disciples, those that are learning, to apostles, those that are actually serving in his name. Is there anybody in here that's in sales that tries to sell something, market something, any sales or marketing? All right, so when you're selling something, do you start out with the negatives of it? Right? No, you usually don't start out with the negatives. How many people do we have in here that are healthcare providers and have a prescription pad? Right, I know there's folks here, right? So do you start out hitting the side effects first? No, you start out talking about the benefits. Now, we've all seen those ads on TV for medication, right? Notice everybody's always happy in the ads on TV for the medications, right? They talk about the great things that these medications can do, all the benefits of the medications, and then what happens at the end? The lawyers got a hold of it and said, hey, you got to talk about the side effects here, right? So very quickly they talk about all the bad things that happen. What do you think sales would be like if they started out with the side effects and all the bad stuff that could happen first? And oh, by the way, it can also help the problem that you're having. There wouldn't be many sales, right? So just to give an example of that, I got some side effects of common medication. Has anybody taken ibuprofen in the last week, Advil? Right? What do you take? You get a headache. The pastor's wife's like, oh, yeah. Probably a lot while he's been out of town, maybe less when he's been out of town, like, oh, my headache's gone. All right, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding, right? But no, what did Advil tell you? You got muscle ache, you got headache, you've been doing too much CrossFit with Tyler and Autumn, take some Advil, right? Right, no, to take away the pain. What if they started out, here's the side effects of Advil. Upset stomach, heartburn, nausea, vomiting, bloating, gas, diarrhea, constipation, dizziness, headache, nervousness. Wait a minute, headache? You can get a headache? I don't know, all right? Mild itching or rash or ringing in your ears, right? What if they started out with that and say, oh, by the way, you have some body aches, take this. This one gets even better. Anybody heard of Ally, the only FDA-approved over-the-counter weight loss pill? All right? It's the only FDA-approved pill. You take this, and all the advertisements say that you can lose like 5 to 10% of your body weight. You just couple that with diet and exercise. And they talk about all the benefits. In fact, I was on their website as I was preparing for this. It was talking about, it was giving all the success stories and, take this is a way to get, and it works. But then you go down and you read some of the side effects. Listen to this. Changes in your bowel function, fatty, oily stool, oily spotting in your undergarments, boy, this is fun, orange or brown colored oil in your stool, intestinal gas with discharge, loose stools, a feeling of needing to have a bowel movement right away, an increased number of bowel movements, poor bowel control, stomach pain, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, rectal pain, weakness, dark urine, clay-colored stool, itching, loss of appetite, jaundice, problems with your teeth and gums, cold symptoms, fever, chills, sore throat, flu symptoms, headache, back pain, skin rash, symptoms of lizard disease. That could get bad, scaly skin, right? Symptoms of liver disease and kidney stones. Sign me up for that one. No, the advertisements don't talk about that, right? They do at the end. The lawyers say, hey, you got to mention it, right? And it's oftentimes in the fine print and the print. No, they talk about the benefits. When I have prospective students come and talk to me about coming to Marietta College, I don't say, well, there was a car stolen in the parking lot last week, right? I don't like bring out the crime report of everything that happened. I don't say, well, these kids failed out and didn't come back, right? You could probably go here. It's cheap. No, I don't talk about it. I talk about the benefits of the college. So usually when we're trying to convince someone to do something, we start out with the good stuff, and then maybe we tuck the bad stuff in at the end, right? Well, Jesus, in the scripture we're going to look at today, he goes counter to that. He starts out with, hey, you're going to follow me. Here's the bad stuff that could happen to you. Not only could it happen to you, it's probably going to happen to you. All right, so we're going to look in Matthew 10 today. And our big idea for today, which we're going to have up on the screen here, is that following Christ is not always easy, but it is always worth it. Following Christ is not always easy, but it's always worth it. So again, this is like a graduation speech that he's giving to his disciples as he is saying, now go out into the world and do these things in my name. We're going to spread the gospel. We're going to, you're going to heal the sick. You're going to minister to the poor. These type of things. So let's take a look at Matthew chapter 10, verse 16 to 23. I am sending you out like sheep among wolves, right? I've been to a lot of graduation ceremonies in my life. I go to one every year for the college. I have never seen the speaker say, get ready for this. I'm sending you out like sheep among wolves. What happens to a sheep if a wolf gets a hold of it? Yeah, not only does it die, it gets ripped apart. Anybody hear about what happened in the New Orleans Zoo a couple weeks ago? A jaguar got out of its enclosure and visited the neighboring animals. It did not go well for the neighboring animals, all right? By the way, New Orleans Zoo is looking for some additional animals to add to their, all right? So I'm sending you out like sheep among wolves. Be as shrewd as snakes and as innocent as doves. Be on your guard. You will be. He doesn't say you might be. There's a remote possibility in some small cases, like the side effect commercials say. You will be handed over to the local councils and be flogged in synagogue, right? You're going to be flogged in church. When's the last time we had a flogging here at Pathway, Pastor Ryan? It's been at least a year, hasn't it? Guess, again, I kid, all right? No floggings, right? You will be flogged in the synagogue. On my account, you will be brought before governors and kings as witnesses to them and to the Gentiles, all right? You're going to be arrested, all right? But when they arrest you, do not worry about what to say or how to say it. At that time, you will be given what to say, for it will not be you speaking, but the Spirit of your Father speaking through you. So it gives us a little bit of encouragement there, saying, bad stuff's going to happen, but I'm going to be there for you, all right? And then he goes on to say, brother will betray brother to death, and a father his child. Children will rebel against their parents and have them put to death. Kids are going to put their parents to death. Kendall, be careful. Don't put me to death. All right? You will be hated by everyone because of me, but the one who stands firm to the end will be saved. Right? He's saying things are going to get so bad. People that follow me, their families may betray them. Brothers are going to put their brothers to death. Fathers are going to betray their kids. Children are going to rebel against their parents. Everyone's going to hate you. Well, this is encouraging, all right? When you are persecuted in one place, flee to another. Truly, I tell you, you will not finish going through the towns of Israel before the Son of Man comes. Basically, this is saying, okay, you're going to finish, you'll be persecuted in one place, you go to another. Guess what? It's going to happen. It's going to happen there too, right? So this is super encouraging to his disciples, right? I'm sure they were saying, now, Do we know how many of there were 11, and then Judas did his thing, and then eventually there were 12, and Judas did his thing 11, then they added the 12th Matthias later. How many of those gave up right when they heard this? Anybody know? The answer is 0, right? They heard this, and yet they went on, right? Now, sometimes we take the pharmaceutical approach to Christianity, where we think about all of the positive things that are going to happen, right? But Jesus does just the opposite here, and he says, if you follow me, these are probably the things that are going to happen to you. But as we're going to find out today, it is definitely worth it, right? There are definitely going to be some problems from living the Christian life, right? When you follow Jesus, not everyone will accept you, and some might even reject you. Now, Jesus is talking to his disciples, apostles, during a time where being a Christian was definitely very counterculture, right? We're lucky to live in a country, we're lucky to live in a society where people may not fully accept what we do, and we'll talk about that here in a minute, but the chances of us being killed for our faith in the United States is much less than it was when Jesus' apostles. In fact, do you know, here's a trivia question, I asked Danae this yesterday, out of the 12 apostles, she knows the answer now. Well, I'm not going to tell you whether she got it right yesterday or not. She did. Kendall? Family members of the preacher are not allowed to participate in this. All right? So 11 plus Matthias. Does anybody know how many of those were killed because of their faith? If Price is Right, you may win because you didn't go over, but you're not right. 11. Did Danae tell you? I don't know. Cheaters. It was 11, right? Now, so 11 of the 12 were actually killed because of their faith. So Jesus was pretty accurate, wasn't he? Now, you may say that 12th guy was a lucky guy, right? Does anybody know who the 12th one was? John, right? John. Does anybody know what happened to John? He was actually thrown, historians tell us he was actually thrown into a pot of burning oil because of his faith. And he escaped, actually unhurt, right? Jesus saved him from that. But he was arrested and imprisoned on the mine work camp of Patmos, the island of Patmos, all right? Where he actually ended up writing the book of Revelation, right? So 11 died for their faith. And the 12th was thrown in burning oil, escaped, and then exiled to a hard labor camp. All right? Sounds like a great way, right? We oftentimes think of these disciples as like rock stars of the Christian faith, and thinking that they walked around, everywhere they went, people following them, and, asking for their autographs, saying, hey, throw me your sandal, those type of things. But that's not the way that it went. Where they went, they were hated. People wanted to kill them, and in fact, they did. Here's another guy, Paul, right? One of the heroes of the Bible, one of the original church planters, responsible for writing a lot of our New Testament. A lot of bad stuff happened to him because of his faith. Right? And he knew what was going to happen to him because of his faith, because before he was converted, his job, what he was responsible for doing, was actually for the Roman government persecuting and being responsible for the death of Christians, right? But he was converted and started to follow that. And we look at in Corinthians, and we look at some of the things that happened to Paul. He tells us firsthand what happened in 2 Corinthians 11, 24 through 28. It says, 5 times I received from the Jews 40 lashes minus 1, right? I think because he was a Roman citizen, he couldn't actually get the full punishment of 40 lashes, so they gave him 39, all right? 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was pelted with stones. 3 times I was shipwrecked. I spent a night and a day in the open sea, just bobbing there. That sounds like fun. I have been constantly on the move, and not because he was just going up, because people are chasing him. I've been in danger from rivers, in danger from bandits, in danger from my fellow Jews, in danger from Gentiles, in danger in the city, in danger in the country. All right, so we've got the city and the country. So we'll flee to the sea. Nope, danger to the sea, and in danger from false believers. And then he goes on to say, I have labored and toiled and have often gone without sleep. I have known hunger and thirst and have gone often without food. I've been cold, I've been naked. Besides everything else, I face the daily pressure of concern for all the churches, right? Ryan, you only have to worry about one church plant, Pathway. Paul was responsible for a ton of church plants, and he was worried about those things. Bad stuff happened to him because of his faith. People did not want to hear it. Bad stuff happened to him. But I tell you what, he wouldn't have traded for the world. Now again, in our country, we enjoy freedoms that people don't enjoy other places. The chances of anybody in this room actually being killed because of their faith is pretty low, much lower than it was back in the first century of the church. But that doesn't mean that living the Christian life isn't without its difficulties, right? There's a lot of things that can happen. As Christians, a lot of stuff that can happen to us. We can lose our families. Sometimes people come to Christ and their families aren't real happy about it. I'm going to tell you an example of a brother whose family actually left him because he became a Christian. But sometimes some of the things that we used to do with our families we're no longer doing, so we become distant, so we may lose relationships. It's possible that we could lose our jobs because of our Christian life or Christian walk. Maybe our boss asks us to do something that's unethical and we refuse to do it. And because we refuse to do it, we lose our job. It may be that we lose friends because of our Christian faith. We stand up for some things that we think are right or some things that we think, we refuse to do some things that are wrong, right? And our friends, they distance themselves from us. So it's possible because we stand up for Jesus and we follow some of the things that we're called to do that we lose our friends. So we could lose our friends, we could lose our jobs, we could lose money. There may be some business decisions that if we make more money, but we feel that it's not right to make those decisions because it's going to hurt people or it goes, maybe borderline illegal or unethical, so we may lose money, right? So following Jesus may be somewhat difficult. I have a friend named Dennis. I met Dennis about 30 years ago, right? And Dennis came to Jesus. He wasn't a Christian, but then he met someone, a friend, and a friend led him to the Lord, and he started going to church, and his life was transformed. He was happy about this transformation that he was experiencing in his life. But you know what? His wife wasn't happy about this. His wife didn't like the change that she saw in Dennis. She didn't like the fact that he was going to church once or twice a week. She didn't like the fact that he was praying before meals. She didn't like the fact that some of the things they used to do for fun, they weren't doing anymore. Dennis's wife left him because of his faith. She said, I don't want to be married to a Christian. I don't want to be married to someone that lives like this. That'd be devastating to Dennis. It was devastating to Dennis. I've talked to him about it. The fact that he became a Christian, his life was transformed, but he lost his wife because of it. Well, when his wife left, he didn't say, you know what, this Christian life isn't worth it. I'm giving up on it. I'm not going to do it anymore. No, he kept living for Jesus. He modeled what it was like to be a Christian man. All right, and this happened to him over 30 years ago. And Dennis remains a single man to this day because he has a biblical conviction. It's his belief, and I don't know if I agree with him or not, but it's his belief that until his wife becomes remarried to someone, his ex-wife becomes remarried to someone else, that he would actually be committing adultery if he got remarried. So that's a belief that he has. So he's remained single. So his wife left him, and he's remained single for the last 30 years because he's followed Jesus. But you know what he's done? He's put his energies into other things. In fact, he was involved in a church plant. He was with the Christian Missionary Alliance church movement, and he was involved in a church plant. And he modeled what it was like to be a godly man, and he inspired many. In fact, he had a couple sons who saw their dad, Dennis, living for Christ, and decided, you know what? The kind of life my dad has, I want that life as well. They saw the fact that he lost their mom because of it, but they said, you know what? I see the good things in my dad's life. I see the ways that he's been changed, and I want to be like him. Well, one of Dennis's sons is named Mike. And believe it or not, there are probably several people in this room that are familiar with Mike. Has anybody ever seen the VeggieTales stories? The cucumber and the tomato? Well, Dennis's son Mike is Larry the cucumber, right? Well, actually, it's the voice behind Larry the cucumber, right? He like didn't give birth to a cucumber, right? That would be a real pickle. All right. You're like, what's this guy's deal? All right. No. His son, along with the guy's friend Phil, Mike and Phil, they started the VeggieTales, right, which has ministered to thousands, if not millions, of young children. So Dennis, although he went through life's difficulties, modeled what it was like to be a Christian man. His kids saw that legacy and followed it and had an impact on others. Dennis would tell you the same thing that the disciples would tell you, and the same thing that the Apostle Paul would tell you. They would tell you living the Christian life is not always easy, but it's worth it. Sometimes people come to Christ, and they treat Jesus kind of like they're genie in the bottle. They treat God like they're genie in the bottle. When I need something, I'm going to ask for it. It's my way to avoid life's problems. It's my way to get money. In fact, there's an approach to Christianity called the prosperity gospel. There's some TV preachers that are into this. You know, if you're faithful, if you give a lot of money, you'll probably get a lot of money. You'll be blessed. These things will happen. Well, let me tell you what. Jesus is not genie in the bottle. By accepting a relationship with Jesus doesn't automatically bring you away from all of life's problems. Christians are not immune to life's problems. Christians get sick. Christians lose their job. Christians go through financial hardships. Christians are not immune to life's problems. Just by accepting Jesus into our life doesn't get rid of all the junk. It doesn't get rid of all the problems that we might go through. All right? Paul, obviously, when he accepted Christ, his life's problems didn't go away. In fact, he probably got more problems because of that. Let me tell you the story about another person I know. Her name's Fran. Fran is in her 70s today and is probably one of the strongest Christians I know. She's also had a lot of problems in her life. Fran was raised in central Ohio, a small town called Galion, just outside of, it's about 45 minutes north of Columbus. She was raised on a farm, kind of your all-American girl, popular girl in high school. She lived for Jesus from a young age, was active in her church youth group, went to church camp, went off to college, was the homecoming queen in college. Everybody liked Fran. She ended up marrying a guy named Barry, who was the senior class president of his college. They were like the popular couple at college. So here's the all-American girl, went on to be homecoming queen in college, married the popular guy in college. You're thinking, man, her life is easy street. Well, they moved to Indiana, and her husband worked at a college in Indiana, and he frequently went and spoke at churches on the weekend. And one weekend, he was out of town, and he was speaking at a church, and Fran decided, you know what, Barry's gone, but there's these new neighbors in this apartment next to us. Let me invite them to church. So she invited her neighbor to church. She went and said, so-and-so, my husband is out of town this weekend. Would you and your girlfriend like to come with me to church? And the guy said, sure, I'm sorry to hear your husband's out of town, but we'd like to go with you. Well, what happened was that man that night broke into Fran's apartment, stabbed her multiple times, beat her with the end of a garden hose, drug her to the front of the yard, beat her some more in the front yard, beat her some more, left her for dead. And then he actually called the emergency squad and said, hey, someone beat my neighbor, come and help her. Right? She went through horrendous tragedy. She was living for Jesus. She invited this person to church, and he turned and beat her. That doesn't seem fair. Well, Fran lived, right? Obviously, she's in her 70s today. She lived, but still carries some of the emotional and physical scars. She has scars all over her body from this attack. Fran's problems didn't end there. Fran and Barry struggled with infertility. They were unable to conceive children. Now, they don't know if it had anything to do with the attack or not, but they tried for a long time, and they were unable to have children. Well, they adopted a son, And then a couple years ago, or a couple years after that, not just a couple years ago, they didn't adopt someone at 68, but a couple years after that, they adopted another son. Well, just a couple months into that new son living with them, the son started losing a lot of weight. You know, he just was very sick. They took him to the doctor, and they tried to figure out what was wrong with him. Well, come to find out, this second son they had, Alan, had a congenital heart problem. He had a hole in his heart. And they didn't know that, obviously, when they started the adoption process. So they went through, month after month of medical tests, and Alan needed open heart surgery. Alan didn't survive the surgery. Alan died. Not only were Fran and Barry, who were so happy about having the second child in their life, devastated because of the loss of that child, they were left with hundreds of thousands of dollars in medical bills because of that. They thought the adoption process was expensive. Well, these medical bills from that, left them with hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. She dealt with being attacked. She dealt with the death of a child. But that's not enough. When Fran was in her 40s, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. She ended up having a mastectomy, and the surgeon said, "You know what? I think I got it all. There's probably no need to do chemotherapy. I don't think it metastasized anywhere." Well, the surgeon was wrong. It metastasized to her bones. And that was 30 years ago, and since that time, it's metastasized about 4 times, and she's dealt with recurrent bone cancer, which is excruciating pain. Here is this lady that has lived a Christian life her whole life. She's been dedicated to serving others. She was a school teacher. She was active in her church. She led Bible school. She taught Sunday school. If that church was open, she was there serving. But yet this bad stuff kept happening to her. But you know what? It didn't weaken her faith, and it strengthened her faith. And I've seen this happen firsthand, because I told you about her second son, Alan. Well, her oldest son was Ryan. That's me. That's my mom. She's the strongest Christian I know. And I think a lot of it, I know a lot of it's because of the things that she's gone through. She followed Jesus every step of the way. She trusted in him, and her faith became stronger because of it. And because of that, has influenced many, many people throughout her life. If we were to ask Fran and say, "Fran, you could have a choice. You can go back in time. You can give up Jesus and not have to experience any of this difficulty, or you can live for him and still have to go through this again." If we ask her 100 times, I guarantee 100 times she'd say, "I never would give up Jesus. I would go through it over and over again because of my relationship with him and the benefits that I see from that, because of the way that he's transformed my life." She would tell you that living for Jesus is not always easy, but it's always worth it. So people may persecute us because of our faith. Bad stuff can happen to us because of our faith. Becoming a Christian doesn't make us immune to life problems. And you may say, "Boy, this is a real uplifting message. I am so glad I got up and came to church this morning." But let me tell you what, there is good news. There is good news in all of this. The good news is that there is nothing to fear. Right? All this bad stuff can happen to us, but there's nothing to fear. Christ is always there for us. He is always there for you. If we go back in the book of Matthew, if we go back to the end of this graduation speech that he's given, he tells us in the end, "Do not be afraid of those who can kill the body, but cannot kill the soul." There's nothing they can do to touch your eternal soul. Be afraid of the one who can destroy both soul and body in hell. So that's basically saying, don't be afraid of all these people. Don't be afraid of life's circumstances. They may be able to take away your earthly life, but they can't take away your eternal life. I am the one that can give you eternal life. He goes on in verse 29 to say, "Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny?" A sparrow is the most common bird in the world. And in fact, right off our deck, we have a little bluebird box, and no bluebirds live into it, but guess what's in there? Family of sparrows. Brand new family of sparrows, because there is a step stool sitting in looking at the box. Danae wanted to go peek in on the little babies, right? Then she billed them for their birth. Just kidding. For those of you who don't know, she delivers babies for, like, Danae, we didn't, right? So, I don't know. She actually didn't do that, right? But, no, I mean, how much is a sparrow worth? Like, if I went and took those sparrows out of the cage and like, tried to sell them, How much would you give me for 2 sparrows? A penny, right? Makes sense. Get it? Cents, penny. Anyway, no, it's not worth much. But it says, not one of them will fall to the ground outside your Father's care. They're almost insignificant, right? You got to think about, in fact, back in that day, they were considered like flying rats, right? Now, they ate them, right? They actually sold them. I was reading some commentary on it. They actually sold sparrows like on a kebab. Like you go to the market and buy like sparrow nuggets, right? But he's saying, but I care about these little sparrows, right? And he says, and even the very hairs on your head are numbered. So don't be afraid, you're worth more than many sparrows. God even cares about this little insignificant animal. How much more does he care about you, right? How many of you have children? All right. Stephanie, how many hairs does Gunnar have on his head? You don't know how many? Do you not love Gunnar? Do you not care about him? Aren't you responsible for like teaching children and you don't even like your own kid? Right? No, I'm just kidding, right? So, no, any of us with kids would do what? We would do anything for our kids. We would protect them at any cost. We know them so well. Kendall, I have no clue how many hairs you have on top of your head. Well, yeah, we'll talk about that later when kids frustrate you. Right, no, he's saying he loves you and cares about you so much. He knows how many hairs you have on top of your head. And someone's saying, I got a bald kid. I know how many hairs, right? No, he loves you and he cares about every detail of your life. How reassuring is that? Some of that, like I've told you before when I've talked, I hate roller coasters. I've been on them a couple times because Danae drags me on. She's like, aren't you a man? I'm like, all right. So I think how reassuring it is that it's been safety checked and all these things are going to hold me and it's very rare. So I think about the security in that. Well, think about this. He cares about a sparrow. How much more does he care about you? He knows you so intimately that he knows every hair on your head. Peter tells us in 1 Peter he's talking about some trials that we may go through. And this is one of the verses that I think about when I think about my mom. It says, in all of this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while you have had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. So you're going through bad stuff. He tells us that these have come so that the proven genuineness of your faith, of greater worth than gold, which perishes even though refined by fire, may result in praise, glory, and honor when Jesus Christ is revealed. You see, when we follow Jesus, when we live our life for him, we're probably going to go through some bad things. But those bad things are going to sharpen us. They are going to hone us. Gold, when it is mined, it is sent through fire. And when it's sent through that fire and it's heated up, the impurities fall away, and we're left with pure gold. Well, that's what happens to us in life when we go through difficulties, when we go through these trials. They're going to happen to us. We go through this fire, and the impurities fall away. And although we've gone through some difficult times, at the end, we are the person that we want to be. We become stronger because of this. He ends his graduation speech. And we look at this, and we're going to look at the message, and this is from chapter 10, verses 38 and 39. And when you leave today, and Ryan's going to talk about this a little bit when he closes, there'll be a card. We've been given a card with some of the red letters, although we've been printing them in black. There's some of the important things. And he tells us in Matthew chapter 10, verse 38 and 39, if you don't go all the way with me, through thick and thin, you don't deserve me. If your first concern is to look after yourself, you'll never find yourself. But if you forget about yourself and look to me, you'll find both yourself and me. So my challenge to you today is this. My challenge to you is to not look and worry about yourself, but look to Jesus. When we find people looking at us or maybe, rejecting us because of our faith, when we find ourselves in situations that are difficult, when we're going through life's trials, not focus on the difficulty that we're experiencing. Our first concern should not be about ourselves. Our first concern should be about looking to follow Him through everything. And what happens is, this Christian life, although it is a difficult life at times, although we're going to have to do something, we may be rejected by people. We may have to make some decisions that we don't really want to make or could end up hurting us, because it's the right thing to do. To know that we do it because of Him. We go through the journey of life, one step after another step. And eventually, we see the transformation that is happening. We see our lives changing to become more like Jesus. We see these impurities burning away. We find ourselves with burdens that we no longer carry. We find ourselves being able to give in a way that we didn't think we could give. We find ourselves being able to forgive people that we didn't think we could forgive, and quite honestly, don't deserve our forgiveness. Why? Because in this process of following Jesus, although we go through difficult times, these impurities begin to burn away. We begin to become the person that we want to be. And the person that we want to be is the person that Christ wants us to be. Now, you may be here this morning and you're saying, he's really emphasized a lot of the negatives of being a Christian. I thought going to church, they're trying to convince you to become a Christian. Well, let me tell you, becoming a Christian doesn't make you immune to life's problems. Some bad things could happen to you because of it. It's possible. Or some things that you don't really like. You're not going to become immune to getting sick. You're not going to become immune to financial problems. But I guarantee you this. If you accept Jesus as your Savior and you follow Him through thick and thin, if you lay down your cross, is what he uses in another translation, and follow Him, you will become transformed into the person that you want to be. You will be transformed into a model of Christ. Following Christ is not always easy, but it is always worth it. The disciples would tell us this. Paul would tell us this. Dennis would tell us this. My mom would tell us this. That following Christ has not always been easy, but it's worth it.